This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast and subscribe. The following podcast is part 2 of a 2-episode podcast series. What would you say, you've been doing this for 16 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of things, but what would you say are sort of investors' biggest mistake? Maybe they're newbies just coming out of the chute, or they may have been doing it for a little while, but they still, it's a mistake that, that really is something that could have been avoided.
Well, so the biggest mistake with triple net is thinking it's like buying a car and you can't lose with it and anything you buy is going to be a good investment, or thinking something is cheap and just because it's cheap, it's a good investment. If you're buying something that's in a rural area at low rents per square foot and it's at a cheaper price, but it's in a very weak area, is that better than buying something that's $500,000 higher in price, but it's in an A location area, with a lot higher dirt value over the long term? The weak suburban area is not as good. One of the other things is to watch out for is sometimes these developers, when they're developing properties, will have what they call tenant improvements. So they'll buy the land, they'll do the exterior shell of the building, and the architectural cost and style will depend on the city and the county zoning requirements for that area, what they have to do as part of their site requirements. And then the interior space, they'll do tenant improvements to that tenant, where they will do the build out for them, or they give a credit to the tenant, and the tenant does their own build out on those spaces. With the developer, sometimes if they're asking, if a regular tenant improvement is $35 a square foot and the tenant wants $50 a square foot, the developer will go in and say, okay, instead of signing this $35 a square foot rent, we want you to sign $44 a square foot rent, which is above market, and we'll pay this extra tenant improvement. And that way, when you put it on the market to sell at a higher net operating income number that's inflated, then we can get a higher price for the property and recoup these extra tenant improvement dollars and then some. But it can be bad for an investor, because if you're buying an investment grade tenant, but it's at some crazy number like $50 a foot rent, which is above market, if that tenant ever goes out and you can only release it at say $40 a foot, all that equity that you put down is now wiped out, that you put down on that property. And the developer just sells those off. So, when I'm evaluating these properties for clients, it's like, is the rent at above or below market for this developer, when they develop this property? Are there a bunch of gotchas that's in the lease, like the tenant can terminate the lease early? Like sometimes my clients will send me these, they're like a kinder care or, when these kiddie academies or something like that, STNL, because it's got a higher cap rate. And it has a corporate guarantee on the lease, but when you read the lease, it has 5 years into the 15-year primary term, the corporate guarantee goes away, and then it moves to the franchisee at that point. Well, the lenders don't like that. They don't want to give a 10-year fixed-rate loan based on corporate only being on the hook for 5 years. And then now it goes to the small franchisee that's weak, for the guarantee on the lease. They don't like stuff like that. So there's just a bunch of gotchas. The biggest thing is when you're buying these properties, the way that the system is designed is that, I'm a buyer specialist. So on my side, when people work with me exclusively, I'm there through the whole process, which is unique. Not a lot of brokers do that or focus on the buyer side. I have a 5-part triple net wealth system, I call it, where I have a proprietary system for on and off market properties that I've developed over almost 17 years, an extensive database across the country. I have commercial retail attorneys. I have 1031 exchange companies. I have some of the best capital markets mortgage brokers with the best lenders. And I have property management companies if they're buying a retail center or something like that. So they don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm a one-stop shop, and I help them throughout the whole process. Even when the attorneys are involved, I'll still look over the leases. I'll still look over all these items with an extra set of eyeballs to, double check and triple check things. So, I'm just an extra set of eyes when they're reviewing buying a property. And so what I do is a lot different than, the listing brokers, as an example. They're focused on selling as many properties they can as fast as they can, because where I'm a principal broker, I get to keep all my commission. A commercial firm, if they're making a listing brokerage $100,000, typically $50,000 goes to the head brokerage, and then you've got 3 people on the team. You've got the senior agent, the agent, and the junior agent. And the senior agent is making out of the remaining $50,000 of the $100,000, maybe $24,000. And then the agent is making maybe, $12,000 or $13,000, and then the junior agent, they might be making, $7,000 or something like that to make up the total $50,000. And so they have to do 6 to 10 transactions to my one transaction. Their whole thing is if you're a buyer and you're new to the space and you don't know much of anything, they typically don't have the time to talk to you, or if they do talk to you, they're just going to show you what's in their listing inventory. And it could be a bad property, mediocre property, or good property. They're just going to try to sell you on whatever it is they have to buy. Whereas I'm not representing the seller, I'm representing the buyer, my client, and I'll go through all my different, extensive network, which is many thousands of retail property owners across the country, and I'm looking for the diamond properties. I'm looking for the best of the best for my clients to buy in their particular price range that they can afford. And I'm not trying to sell them a piece of junk because I don't represent the seller, and I don't need a quick sale because I don't have to do the 6 to 10 transactions they have to do to my one transaction. So, if it takes so many months to find it, then that's what it takes, So that's the main difference from what I do compared to what most of the other companies do in the commercial space.
That's great. That's awesome. It's almost turnkey, just like it seems like. But you also do a lot of consulting and educating too, from what I understand.
Yeah. So, I do these podcast, shows and stuff like that. And I also belong to, your listeners may or may not be aware of BiggerPocketscom. I'm a commercial moderator on there. And I've got about, over the decade of time, I've got about 15,000 posts on there, answering people's questions over the years. And my friend Josh Dorkin, he started that a long time ago, and it used to be just a static one page with a couple of bank foreclosure links in the middle of it. Now it's got forums and videos and everything else under the sun, and there's about 1.5 million investors worldwide on that site for real estate, all different topics and everything else. So, I post some things there, and I do some of the podcast shows. I'm in the middle of writing a book right now. It's not finished yet. That's a lot of work to get all this stuff out of my brain and into a book. The stuff that I don't do, if someone wants me to be a fee for developer, or they're developing a site and they've got umpteen billion questions they want to ask me, or they're already mid-process under contract on a deal and the brokers are already getting paid and they want me to, come in and help them in a consultancy role for $5,000 or $10,000 on something I would typically get paid $80,000 or $100,000 to do. I don't have the time for that, and I'm not interested in that type of situation. And it's just like if someone wants to buy something through me and become a client, I'm happy for them to learn the process and educate them over that time, or they're going to invest with me passively, where I'm the sponsor. Then I can answer their questions, and things like that. But if I get a request where someone's just out of the blue asking me a bunch of questions to learn about triple net, and they're not going to become a client or invest with me passively, just because of how busy I am, I don't have time for those things.
Sure, no, I understand. What would you say is sort of the hottest type of property that you deal with right now? Are there certain ones that just are just doing super well and seem to attract a lot of buyers?
Yeah, so, what most people want is passive. Most clients, either they start out in the commercial retail space if they sold a business, or they're a doctor with high income, or they've had an inheritance or something like that. They want to own retail. Retail over other asset classes is a lot more passive than owning a multifamily building or self-storage or residential houses or quadruplexes or any of that stuff. So within retail, there's the most passive to the least passive. So the way to think about it is absolute single tenant net lease, triple net, where you do nothing. That's the most passive. That's the hottest out there that most everybody wants. Typically, they are, buying that. They're setting it, forgetting it. They're doing estate planning. Any 1031 exchanges, you can tax defer, and then eventually, when you pass away, you can leave it to your kids on a stepped-up basis. And all that depreciation recapture and capital gains, all that stuff typically gets wiped out, and the kids get it at the new stepped-up basis. And then there's even the estate tax to try to reduce that down. People use trust and other kind of vehicles in addition with stuff like that. And then after single tenant net lease, the next most passive, where the cap rate rises a little bit on the yield, would be like a 2 to 4 tenant retail center with national tenants, say an Aspen Dental, T-Mobile, Starbucks, 10-year fixed leases, newly built, 10% rental increases every 5 years. Typically buying that at $3 to $4 million, and you're putting 30 to 35% down or something like that. There is a base rent plus CAM. It's called common area maintenance. The common area maintenance charges. The tenants pay that monthly along with the base rent. There's a budget set for the year on what their expected costs are going to be compared to the percent of space that they occupy within that retail center. And then you have a property management company, but typically you're only maybe on the phone with them for half an hour once a month or something when you're dealing with national tenants, because they pay like clockwork. When you move along the spectrum, you start having to do more work. So when you move away from national tenants on a 3 to 5 unit retail center, you start getting into, there's one national tenant, a regional, a couple of mom and pops within a retail center, all the way up to where there's no national tenants in the retail center, no regionals, maybe one regional, and then they're all like mom and pop tenants. And you're dealing with 10 to 15 tenants in a retail center or something like that. That would be the most work. So those typically are the least desirable, even though they're a little bit higher cap rate. If you already have a bunch of money and you're worth millions of dollars, or $5 million or whatever it is that you're worth, would you rather invest $1 million and have an easy 6 or 7% return versus a headache 10% return when you don't need that? Because you're already making a bunch of money, you're already worth a bunch of money. A lot of people, they don't want the headache. They'd rather take the easy 7 over the hard 10 or 11. Now that's just the cash on cash that I'm talking about. Once you factor in your mortgage principal pay down and any depreciation on your taxes and stuff like that, then you can push the total return over double digits. And to be passive in commercial, where inflation averages, U.S. inflation averages maybe 2 or 3% a year, and you're hitting an overall yield of 10% on something that's passive. For most people, that's a win because they just want to outpace inflation and keep growing their equity and their wealth, but in a safe way, not in a risky way.
Sure. And on those that you would say are the more passive, and I know this is hard because there's so many different factors and variables, but on your typical maybe $2 million deal, what kind of a sort of monthly cash flow are these properties yielding for people? And again, I know it's going to vary a lot, but just kind of a rough idea.
So if you had a $2 million property, if we keep it simple, if we had a $2 million property and you just paid all cash for it, maybe you could get something at a 6 cap, depending on what it is. It's a 6.25 cap rate, something like that. So you might be generating pre-tax $120,000 off the $2 million to $130,000, something like that, in that lower price range. It's more cap rate compressed, and the lower price ranges of $3 million and below, about 75% of purchases are all cash, and 25% are using some form of debt. When you move up into the $4, $5, $6, $7 million purchase price range, even if someone has all cash, they're not using all their cash to be concentrated into one property like that. They want to diversify. So it typically flips. About 75% are finance and 25% are cash. And in that higher price point, you can typically get a higher cap rate and a little bit lower interest rate because it's a larger loan and more lenders compete for it. You can get maybe 10 or 15 basis points cheaper on the interest rate. And it's kind of the middle area where you can extract the most value because it's too big for the smaller guys that can afford $3 million and below, and the $6 million price point is too small for the REITs and the pension funds and the insurance companies that are typically buying the $10, $15, $20 million STNL type stuff.
You've done both multifamily as well as retail. How do you find lenders? Are they more receptive to one over the other?
Multifamily is different. Multifamily uses Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on the really big properties, $20, $30, $40 million properties. They'll use Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, long-term 30-year fixed debt. If you buy a lot of properties with them, you're considered a preferred vendor. And, instead of taking 6 months to close with them, it can take, 2 or 3 months' time. On single-tenant net lease properties, there are specific lenders within the bank department. So you have the credit unions, you have the local banks, you have the regional banks, you have the national banks, you have the life co-insurance companies, you have the commercial mortgage-backed security lenders, and then you have kind of the family office or private institutional type lenders for these single-tenant net lease properties. And typically the longest you'll see is a 10-year fixed, on a commercial real estate loan versus 30 years on multifamily. Multifamily used to be a good value about 8 or 9 years ago when the vacancy was at 10% and the rents were, below market. Now everything's top cycle, whether you're buying a $4 million property or a $10 or $15 million property, the cap rate stays pretty much the same. And so if you're buying if it's a 5% cap rate, but they're saying the multifamily building is predicated on 3% vacancy and, 4% rent growth and 35% operational expenses to arrive at their 5 cap that they're selling for. Historically, over 30 years of data in the multifamily space, those numbers aren't going to hold up. Those are bubble numbers over the last 2-3 years. And to project out that you're going to own a property for 10 years and the costs are going to stay that way and the rent growth is going to stay that way is a way to lose your shirt in multifamily because a lot of the rental increases have already happened. it already makes up a huge part of people's living expenses once you factor in rising healthcare costs. And so, rent's already making up 30% of a residential tenant's total income. And so once it hits a certain ceiling, they can't afford to pay any more increases in rent. So a lot of that rent growth, the last down cycle I saw in the multifamily sector, people moved in with their parents or, other living arrangements, and you had vacancy creep up at multifamily buildings, and landlords, just to service their debt loads, would, reduce the rent down or offer a waiver of security deposit or 3 months rent, and they would infight amongst each other to keep up the occupancy level in the area against each other, just to service their debt loads, to try not to go under when the rent growth stopped. And because, see, unlike in retail where the tenants pay for your cost, in multifamily, if the city or the county reassesses your building and the property taxes go up or your insurance costs go up or all these things go up, that eats into your potential returns, owning that multifamily building, because your tenants aren't reimbursing you for those higher costs. So it's just eating into your projected returns. And so if you have flat rent, then you have property taxes go up and you have your insurance policy go up, and if you're having to pay water and get reimbursed by your tenants, and then even with no leaks, the water department goes up on their per gallon water and sewer usage rates, that can take a two-bed unit, water usage, family of 3 or 4 at $75 a month. It can take it to $125 a month, and then all that starts compounding into your returns. So the way I look at it is, why would I buy a multifamily building? The other thing is passive. Like, to get passive with multifamily and have a full-time repair person on site for one of these older buildings, and because the costs are usually, purchase price is $80,000 to $100,000 per door, you're going to have to be at a purchase price of about $7 million to $10 million to get passive. Versus commercial retail, you can buy at a better cap rate. You can buy something as small a price as $1.5 million. You can have an investment-grade tenant with a long-term lease in place. If the economy's going up, down, or sideways, you have a lease that's backed by thousands of locations, and you can model out what you're going to be getting, because it's written right into the lease. You're going to be getting 2% rental increases a year. Your debt's going to be this for 10 years. And unlike multifamily, if the economy goes down and people lose their secondary jobs or their primary jobs get cut and they start falling behind on rent and things like that, you're not going to have to deal with those kind of issues when you own retail properties versus the multifamily. So everybody's buying up a lot of multifamily right now, but my personal view, just to what I saw in the last down cycle, I feel it's heavily overvalued right now to buy at that low of a cap rate. There's a lot of drivers where costs can go up. Your expected rent growth over time to blend the cap rate might not happen, and now you're saddled with massive debt and low return and a big headache.
Right. Well, one of the things that is real apparent, at least over here in California and I understand around the country too, is that Amazon's impact on retail has been pretty significant. I mean, there's some malls here that look like ghost towns. Has that impacted the areas that you're in at all in terms of their influence on the retail side?
So when you look at retail, you have to break it down, and there's these stories of Amazon apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. So basically, I want to shed some light on this so that people fully understand. So we have an organization within retail. It's called the International Council of Shopping Centers. It's ICSC. It's an organization that's been in business over 60 years. When these reporters go get this information, they'll take a sound bite and they'll make this big news story and scare people with all this crap. That's where they're getting some of the information from. Those of us in the business, we've known, apparel retail, big box retail, 60, 100,000 square foot stores, malls. We know that that's been dying for, Toys R Us, all that. That's been dying for like the last 10 years. Those spaces are being readapted. With the malls, it comes down to the owner in particular. With a mall, they have to decide, do they want to invest $1 billion renovating a mall and making it brand new again, and are they going to be able to get that money back out of it? Or are they on a sinking ship that they need to readapt that mall, put in a Dave & Buster's or a movie theater or a bunch more restaurants, because the way the malls used to be set up is you'd have Macy's and Sears and these different type of big anchors, and the mall owners would give them really low rent per square foot, almost free rent, and then they'd make up higher rent off of the smaller tenants that are in those little specialty shops that would be around the big anchors within the mall, and that's how they would make their money. Well, what happened is when Macy's and Sears and some of these locations went dark or went out of business, then all the common area maintenance costs for the whole mall, this aging mall, were spread out amongst these smaller, single unit level operators. And they couldn't shoulder that cost. So what they would do is they would move out of the mall and they would go to a more high profile location, like one of the neighborhood retail centers I'm telling you about that's on the main road frontage with all the traffic going by. And they would pay less rent per square foot that they were paying in the mall, less common area maintenance charges, and people could just drive right up and go do business with them versus parking at a mall and walking a super long distance to reach their store. So malls that are in high-profile locations, some of them are getting re-imaged at a cost of, like $1 billion. Others will be, readapted where they're putting like kind of multifamily or living quarters up top and retail just on the bottom, and they're readapting how that mall is going to be to change its use a little bit. But then there's some malls that are, you've got old malls or former Kmart's that are out in, weak suburban areas in the middle of nowhere with nothing going on. Those buildings, the cost to readapt them is more expensive than to just level them to the ground and do something completely different there. You have to almost get those properties for nothing or get some kind of state grant or federal grant to make those pencil. Now, as far as the Amazon goes, the online sales to brick and mortar sales. So total retail sales for online are about 15% now. They used to be around 5%, but a huge portion of those online sales are existing brick and mortar stores expanding their web presence online to where they weren't really pushing that before. So if you're talking about online only companies, it's a very small percentage of that total 15%. People are experiential in nature. For instance, most people aren't going to sit in their house 7 days out of the week and drop ship 150 boxes from Amazon and never leave their house their whole life. That's not realistic. That's not going to happen. People want to go out and eat. They want to socialize with their friends. They want to go to the movies. They want to play sports. They want to, drive their car outside. They want to go on vacations. They want to do all this kind of stuff. Human nature says that we're going to go out and experience things because that's what we want to do. We're not going to be holed up in our house for a week. So while Amazon is having growth, a lot of that is in specialty type products that we would used to find in the mall that people can just ship online. Actually, Amazon has started to go into brick and mortar. They call it the last mile. So they're looking to go in old Rite Aids or, pharmacy stores that have gone dark or something like that. And they'll kind of have like a little mini warehouse space that's close to a bunch of subdivisions. And, the last mile, they'll just deliver there from the larger distribution centers. So neighborhood retail isn't going away. If anything, that part of it's expanding. It's the big box stuff that's really getting crushed, and you really got to have deep pockets. You got to be a REIT or insurance fund or something that's got, billions of dollars where you can, buy these things and readapt them over a span of an 8 to 10 year hold type thing to want to do something like that.
Right. Well, thanks. That's some good insight. Well, our audience is primarily folks that are 50 years of age and older that are really seriously looking at their retirement, and some are saying, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough to really carry me through my retirement. People are living longer, and there's all kinds of other costs, medical and assisted living, and that people aren't factoring in. And then you've got those that maybe they have this great nest egg to last them through their retirement, but they're, the thing they have in common is they're both looking for a way to either supplement their retirement or to make the best of their nest egg. So what would you say to those folks that are looking and are listening to right now to the show, wondering, is this a place that I could really get involved? And, maybe they don't have as much as you require, or maybe they do, and or more than meet that requirement. So how would you address those folks?
Yeah. So what I would say is everything's a case-by-case basis, but yeah, absolutely. They could get in the single-tenant net lease space. A lot of people have financial advisors and banks and things like that. But, if you're getting 1% on the CD and inflation is hitting you at 2% a year or 2.5% a year, and you're getting taxed on that 1%, add insult to injury, you're going to keep eating into your retirement savings, not outpacing inflation. And so as you get older and older, you're going to worry about, is this money going to last? Is this money going to run out before I kick the bucket? That's what people are thinking. Can I live comfortably and have the life that I want and have quality golden years, and have the life experiences? Or am I going to be worrying about, is Medicare going to be covering this last bill? And I got to argue 5 hours on the phone about this cost or that cost because I don't have enough money coming in. So, with single tenant triple net, unlike with stocks, with a recent coronavirus scare, people are selling off stocks like crazy. It's going up and down like a yo-yo. If you owned a single tenant net lease property, hey, guess what? You wouldn't be worrying about any of that stuff. You could be on the beach with your family and your grandkids or whatever, traveling in your RV. You wouldn't have a care in the world that check's coming next month. But if you had a lot of your wealth, with an investment banker who's got you invested in stocks and who knows what else, and it's going up and down like a yo-yo, that's going to make it hard for you to go to sleep at night, when the value of your net worth is moving by, 10 or 20% in a span of one day. That's hard to stomach when you get older. When you're younger, people can be more riskier with their investing choices, and they have time to regenerate that capital again and that net worth, even if they make huge mistakes. If you're older and you've already gotten to where, you got a couple $1 million and you want to generate X return off of it and you want to do it safely and you want to outpace inflation, that's not the time to make risky investments. That's the time to make solid, safe investments that you can count on month after month, year after year for your retirement. That's why people like the single tenant net lease space, is because of the security it offers, and it's passive, and you don't have to do all this work, but you get returns that outpace inflation, and you still grow your money to where you're not eating too much into your savings each year through your golden years.
That's great. Well, you've got just a very fascinating career, and you've done well in terms of putting together it sounds like a real winning company here. What excites you about your company in the years ahead here, or sort of what's your end game, if you know that yet?
So for me, a lot of people think that money is the answer. I personally don't believe that the love of money is the answer for anything. There's very few people I find that love money. They like money and what it can do for them to free them up to pursue what they're passionate about in life. So my view on life is different than a lot of people. Growing up, I had a very, rough childhood because about 15 years of age, my best friend's dad that lived right up the street, he worked for Bell South, and he was complaining of back pain, and he never went to the doctor. And basically, when he went to the doctor, they said, you have cancer and it's spread everywhere. There's nothing we can do for you. And so basically, after going to the hospital and some other things, he basically wanted to pass away in his home. So I would go over and see my friend, and I saw his dad go from, walking around with a cane to laying in a bed to laying on the ground to eventually just being able to move his arms, and to eventually you would just see his eyes following you around, and that was it. And we're waiting for him to pass away. And my dad worked for the Atlanta post office as a supervisor overnight over thousands of people as a manager. And he would drive back home. And I remember I was in school, and they called me down from school, and my mom was in the back of this car, and they drove me home, and they said that my dad was killed in a car accident coming home from work. And and it was a real tough time. I had 4 half brothers, but they lived in other places from the same mom, and or we were all from the same dad. They had a different mother, and I had to, his dad finally passed away after my dad's funeral. We had a closed casket because the impact of the wreck. We wanted people to remember him for how he looked before, but his dad finally passed away. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks later after that, and then my mom's mom passed away later that year. So basically, I had to become an adult real quick. I had to work 2 jobs. I had to go to school. I had to do all these things to grow up real quick. So typically, the way people might view something now in their 50s or 60s or 70s with time, I viewed things from that lens when I was 18 or 20 years old, because I experienced a lot of loss in my life that people might not experience that early on in their life. And so that caused me to really, value time, So even though I make a lot of money, I really value, seeing my mom that's fixing to turn 77 and just taking her out to lunch, or seeing one of my friends, or taking a vacation, or just spending time with my 4-month-old son, helping people achieve their dreams or their investment goals as clients. That's what I'm really excited about for the future. But I've set goals for myself, so I'm not going to work myself into the ground. You can't take the money with you. I want to have fun along the way, have a lot of happy and fun life memories. And, if I'm worth whatever it is, I'm 45 now. I'd rather be worth 30 million by the time I'm 60 and have decades of memories I can look back with pictures and videos and think about those happy times and still be happy, versus, work myself into the ground and be unbalanced in every other part of my life and leave collateral damage in every other part of my life. It's not worth it. My estate attorney told me that there was one of his clients, he didn't mention names, but he worked his whole life with his business. He's worth $150 million. And basically he got into his 70s and sold a business, and okay, I want to see the grandkids now. And his kids didn't want anything to do with him. They said, "Dad, you weren't there for us when we were kids. We don't want you around our kids." And he was like, "Well, I did all this for you." And they were like, "You didn't do all this for us. We wanted to spend time with you. We didn't care about all that stuff." So there has to be a balance in everything that you do, and a purpose, that makes you happy long term. And for me, it's not all about the money. Money is more a byproduct to help people have the passive income that they want to really do what makes them happy in life. There's some people that, obsess about money and love it and everything, but that's a very, very small percentage of people in the world. So that's just kind of the way based on what happened to me in my life, that's kind of how the way I view outlook on life. I appreciate every second of every minute of every hour of every day, and truly try to enjoy it the most possible every single day.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's very wise advice, and I think a lot of people listening take that to heart. Thank you. Wow. Well, we've gone way over time here, so this is going to become a 2-parter, just so you know.
Yeah, I told you. See, people think triple net is simple, but I could talk about it for months. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's great. That's why I let it run over, because I really think that there's just a lot of good content in here. If anybody's looking at this, or maybe they're hearing about it for the first time, I think there's a lot to chew on there, and so I'm definitely excited about when this airs. This will be great. But we have a session now, what we call sort of our wrap it up, where I actually ask you a series of sort of quick, kind of like our lightning round. You're BiggerPocket guy. And just to ask you a series of quick questions. You share resources that you know. Hopefully those resources will be of value also to our listeners. So if you are ready, let's wrap it up.
Sure.
All right. Favorite real estate book?
Mine's going to be different. So mine is Investing in Retail Properties by Gary Rappaport. He's a personal friend of mine. He's been syndicating over 40-something years. He owns about 9 million square feet of retail himself as a sponsor, something like that. I don't know the exact number.
Wow.
Don't quote me on that. And I think he manages about 15 million square feet of retail. He buys mainly retail shopping centers, syndicating within a main geographical area of about 100 miles. If you're looking at doing some of your own syndicating, that book's about 600 and something pages long that really dives in deep. That's a great read to look at.
Excellent. How about just a favorite general business book?
There was an old book that I liked a long time ago. It's by Jeffrey Gitomer. I think it's Gaitomer. It was called People Hate to Be Sold, But They Love to Buy. And it just goes into talking about how to approach business and relationships in general, where people both win. And you're coming from a place of authenticity and how you like to do business and realness instead of being fake, trying to make a buck off somebody.
I like it. They're two good resources. Yeah, I've never heard, first time I've heard them, so it's great. How about your most valuable website for success?
For retail's highly specialized. I'm writing a book, so they're hard to find, great detail level information. There's a couple of triple net books out there, but they don't go into great detail like I'm writing about. As far as general real estate, I like BiggerPockets. There's over 1.5 million investors on the website. There's, of course, a Plus Pro and a premium account, but you can go create a free account on there, and you can go peruse the forums and see literally millions of questions that have been asked over the years, from anything from tax liens to residential investing to commercial, whatever you could possibly almost imagine, someone has asked on there, and you flipping houses or rehabbing houses. I mean, just for a site to go to kind of say, hey, I don't know what I want to invest in real estate. I just want to see a smorgasbord of, free information on different topics. That's kind of a great site to go to read on for free.
And with 14,000 comments you've made already, I mean, that's there's going to be a lot of good stuff from you, I'm sure, on commercial that people can access as well.
Yeah, they can go and look up, my name on there, and they'll see my profile. And if they read through the post, I've answered a lot of stuff over the years, specifically about commercial. I used to answer on some other forums, like I know about residential and other stuff, but I don't answer on those forums in a lot of years because I'd get people calling me, I've got a tenant, I need to evict them, what I need to do about this. And I'm like, I do commercial, so I just stick to the commercial forums now. But yeah, there is a lot of information from me on that site. I'm compiling some more information and material for people to read. It's just on my website, it's just not ready yet. It's a lot of work. I have to get my marketing team to take everything out of my brain and put it into a easy to read, reviewable format with pictures and graphs and all that kind of stuff. And it's to make it look simple and be easily readable and digestible is a lot harder than people think.
Oh, when that book comes out, you better let us know so we can have you back and talk all about it. That sounds like a great resource. How about favorite app?
Wow, let me see. App. I'm probably. What's kind of funny is that when I was in my 20s and teens, I knew like everything there was to know about any kind of technical stuff. Now I don't know anything about the technical stuff. My 11-year-old nephew Johnny, he's got 20 of his friends on some video group chat thing, and they're posting stuff in real time and having these emojis like dancing across the screen and doing all this I don't know what all they're doing kind of stuff. I look on my phone and I basically do text, email, phone calls, take some pictures and video, and I don't know what the other 10,000 apps are doing. So for me, my thing is a life of simplicity. So I've read a lot of books I've read thousands of books from Walt Disney to Ted Turner to whoever. And the one thing I've got from them is, quit chasing the next shiny object, or the rabbit that's running away, like Tony Bennett said, he only wanted to be a great singer. He knew he wanted to be a great singer. Everything else was just noise. So he just focused on singing, so what I try to do is I try to make it simple. I have the same, kind of clothes I've had for years in my closet. I put them on. I don't think about it. And then I just focus on commercial real estate and learning more about commercial real estate every day. The apps and the technology, I've got a marketing team. The guy that does my marketing, I'm meeting him tomorrow. I meet once a week with him. He used to be with Ted Turner over all of their business operations, scaling all the different businesses for Ted Turner Corporation.
Wow.
So he went out and started his own company so many years back. And so what they do is they break down every different part of your business and get everything out of your mind and get it into scalable and replicable systems, that make it easy to do over and over and over again. And I just pay them to do all that stuff. I used to do my own website a lot of years ago and looking at the latest app or whatever it was, and I would miss one step out of 10 steps, and I would waste like days, and some other guy fixed it in like 5 seconds. So what I've learned is stay in my lane, do what I do that I'm the best at, and then other people where I'm just kind of good at it or average at it, but they're a superstar, I let them do that, and I get out of their way.
Well, that brings me to the next question, which is favorite quote.
I believe it was Albert Einstein. He said something about following instructions will get you from point A to point B, but imagination will get you everywhere, or something like that. I can't remember the exact words. I don't have it right in front of me. But I've never been, and it's great if someone wants to be this way. I just knew from an early age I wouldn't work for somebody else. I'm not happy working for someone else. I'm just an innovator, a creator. I'll have multiple ideas a day that I'll think of to add to my business to always make it better. And that's what makes it exciting for me, is to be that way. After my father died, I had a paid-for college scholarship. I was there a couple of years, and, a couple of my buddies were there. We played pool in between classes at the hall there, the hall building between all the classes. And one of them owned a vending machine company where they ran around, did all the gumball machines and all that kind of stuff. And another one had another business. And we were just looking at each other saying, what are we doing here? We're never going to work for somebody else. That's not what we want to do. And I just knew that I was never going to be that way. So that's my favorite quote by Albert Einstein is just, if you have the ingenuity and the drive and the innovation, you can do anything. Another one of my favorite quotes is I used to take martial arts. I still do sometimes. I'm third degree black belt. But Grandmaster used to say, today impossible, tomorrow possible. So it was just a quote that, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So you have to have an open mind about what you can achieve, that's possible out there. So those are just kind of the quotes that I like.
Yeah. And the final one here, if you lost absolutely everything, all your assets, all your money, and all you had was $1,000 in cash, what would you do with that $1,000 in cash? Knowing what you know today, what would you do to relaunch your real estate investing business or your real estate business?
A lot of that would depend on how old you were. So I'm 45 now. If I lost everything I had today and I just had $1,000, I would put it back into the marketing of my business because I get one more transaction, I make $100,000. So I take that $1,000 and I turn it into $100,000 right away. So that's what I would do with that type of if I just had $1,000. But I'm not going to reach that situation because some of the experts out there, they talk about, like, for instance, if you know that you've got $1 million and it's pulling in $100,000 for you passively a year, and it's a safe investment, then you keep that as a safe line base investment and you never touch that. And then as your net worth grows from 2 to 4 to 5 to 10 to 12 million, now if you want to take, you make $1 million a year, you want to take 10% of that or 50 or 5% of that and put 50 to 100,000 into something more risky. But it's got a high yield to it. If you lost everything from that investment, or most of it, from your other investments over a span of 4 to 6 months, you could recuperate what you lost to that small amount back in that time period off your other safer investments by doing portfolio averaging. So you had maybe 80% of your investments in very safe investments, 10% in average investments, and then 10% in super risky investments that may or may not pay off. But if you lost all your money in that 10%, it's not going to affect you that much, and you're going to recuperate that money in a short period of time.
Gotcha. Well, I am sure there's a lot of folks listening right now that would like to find out more about you or maybe even try to reach you. What's the best way for folks to do that?
So the best way is for them to go to my website. So it's www.nninvest.com. And when you reach the main page, the first page on the website, you'll see a click Get Started button. And so when they click Get Started button, there'll be a informational form that they'll fill out with their contact information. And there'll be that PFS template. So one-page template. They don't have to put account numbers or anything like that. It's just basic information. They hit submit. Once I receive that information and review it, then I will follow up with them to potentially get on a phone call to answer their questions that they would have about possibly investing with me passively or buying to own 100% directly themselves. And that's typically how the process works. For scheduling purposes and because of how busy I am with clients, I only work with clients one-on-one. They have to work with me exclusively, and that's typically, now you can go to my website and you can look around and review all the materials and that kind of stuff. But if you want to, ask me questions directly, I have to know that you're someone that has a capability to purchase or invest with me passively. I can't have someone worth $100,000 contacting me about buying a $1.5 million property and spend 40 minutes on the phone with them. That just doesn't make sense to do that. So if they just go to my website, fill out the form, that's the best way to reach me.
Okay, great. Just out of curiosity, too, it's kind of off the mark here, but do you ever sort of put people together? Maybe you've got one person that wants to invest, but they really maybe need another sponsor or somebody to do that deal as maybe a joint venture or something. Do you ever do that or ever encounter that kind of situation?
Yes, I've encountered it a couple of times. There's some times where someone might have $300,000 or $200,000, and they need someone else with $300,000 to come in to buy something. And occasionally, I'll put them together. So that does happen occasionally. It's not
Cool.
It's not all the time, but it does happen occasionally.
Great. Well, it has been awesome having you on here, Joel. This has been a great show, very informative, and like I said, it's going to be a two-parter, so we'll have one and followed by the other episode. But before we go, we have a tradition here at the Old Dogs REI Network, and this, we're called Old Dogs. So we have all of our guests close us out with their best old hound dog howl. So if you are ready, This is a real important moment here. You just gotta give us your best. You're from Alabama. They got hound dogs down there. They got all kinds of stuff. So should be able to give us a good hound.
Yeah, let me try. It might be a wolf or something. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'll give it my best. I'm born and raised in Georgia, but every time someone talks to me, they say, "You don't sound like you're from Georgia." They always tell me that. You don't sound like some redneck that's lived there your whole life. I'm like, well, I'm not. But so let me try this. Let's see. How was that?
Oh, that was good. Now that sounded like a hound dog, not a wolf. It definitely sounded like a hound dog.
So I pulled it off, man. I pulled it off.
You definitely did. Well, Joel, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great show.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Also, I want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Please note, everything presented here today, everything Joel talked about, including these links, and a lot of this information can be accessed in our detailed show notes on the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And you're going to look for the episode with Joel Owens. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.